I truly believe that Rand is the person to take on the Washington establishment and will unlock and unleash the American dream. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the next president, Mr. Rand Paul.
On day one, I'd eliminate by executive order just about everything President Obama has done by executive order. He's instituted hundreds and hundreds of regulations, but so have previous presidents as well, that have been injurious to our economy and get between the consumer and the producer. I'd get rid of those regulations. Any regulations that have been put in place by executive order that I think are injuring our economy, I'd get rid of.
Would you do this amid?
I'm talking about day one in administration, so I misinterpreted your question. With regard to terrorism, I think that we stand with France, and we are an ally of France, and we do whatever we can to help them. I think in talking about our security and talking about what this means, whether or not we have to have a heightened sense of protecting our security, I think that is true. One of the things I mentioned in my speech out there is 2-3 years ago, I introduced a bill or an amendment to the immigration bill that would have provided for more scrutiny for people coming into our country. Refugees, immigrants, students, they would have had background checks, and there would have been much higher degree of scrutiny. And the point I made in my speech was, I introduced this to Rubio and Schumer's immigration bill, and yet Rubio, Schumer, and all the authors voted against any conservative amendments. And I think that was a mistake, not only for the bill, but also for our national security.
Would that certainly allow refugees from Syria into the U.S.?
I don't think we need to be admitting large amounts of Syrian refugees into the country. I would like to see Saudi Arabia take them. I'd also like to see Iran take them. The two arsonists in that region throwing gasoline on the fire, Saudi Arabia, Iran, they're not taking any refugees. I think the refugees need to go to some of the local countries. Anybody else?
Senator, talk about the immigration bill. It's the 2013 bill. You mentioned Senator Rubio didn't want that amendment. He's getting a little more scrutiny on that immigration bill. Do you think that's needed? It hasn't been around enough in this campaign?
I think when people discover that Marco and Chuck Schumer basically had a secret deal to block all amendments, that's going to alarm some conservatives who really wonder how conservative it is to have a secret deal with Chuck Schumer to block out all other amendments. Also, there were conservative amendments that were put forward. My amendment would have said that Congress would vote each year on whether the border is secure. That would give us some say in whether or not the executive branch does what they're supposed to do. The main complaint from conservatives for all immigration deals is that going back to 1986, legal status was granted and a promise for border security was given. We never got the border security. So in my amendment, Congress would have had to vote each year on whether the border was secure in order for any kind of process or reform to go forward. I was always disappointed that Marco Rubio voted against that. And probably not that many people know that, but we're in a presidential cycle now, and we want to make sure every Republican across the country knows that he blocked the conservative amendments to the immigration bill, and that in particular, my amendment would have provided more scrutiny on people who might be coming here to attack us. So mine was a national security amendment as well as an immigration amendment, and Marco blocked it because he thought it was a better idea to have a deal with Chuck Schumer than it was to vote for a conservative amendment.
Senator, as you know, it's getting harder and harder for college students to get jobs straight out of school. As president, what will you do to fix this?
The first thing we need to know is where are jobs created. I think jobs are created in the private sector, not in government. President Obama thought he would just put a lot of government money into the system that would create jobs. It didn't work. I would like to leave more money in the private sector, so I would lower taxes, I'd get rid of the tax code, and I'd have one single tax rate, 14.5% for business and 14.5% for individuals. That would leave a couple $1 trillion in the economy that I think would create jobs. The other thing we can do for students is I would allow students to deduct not only the principal, but the interest of their cost for going to school. I would also do what I can to break up the educational monopoly so there's competition in higher education.
Senator Marco Rubio's child tax plan would essentially create a $1 billion welfare program. Where did you get that figure?
The tax credits, I think, by the Tax Foundation are estimated to be $170 billion a year, and times 10, that's more than $1 trillion actually.
Senator, on the defense budget, the defense budget is, I think, what, about 600 billion or so? In order to spend it wisely, should the ultimate number be higher or lower than that?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think you put it in a good way. If you have waste in a current program, will you get less waste or more waste if you increase the number? You know, so if we're at 600 billion and Marco wants it to be 800 billion, are we going to get more or less waste? Do you have an incentive to get rid of waste if you raise the number dramatically? So I think it's a big mistake to raise it. But we also should put the number in perspective. We spend a little over $600 billion compared to right after 9/11. That's a doubling of what we spent right after 9/11. We've doubled the amount in nominal terms, and in real dollars, we've had a 50% increase in the military. We spend more on our military than the next 10 countries combined. You had Russia, China, and 8 more countries, and then you get to what we spend. So we spend a considerable amount. We have to get rid of waste. We spent $43 million in Afghanistan on a gas station, a natural gas station, which is probably never going to be used by anybody. They'll probably, as we speak, are dismantling it for parts. And we spent $43 million on it. That came out of the Defense Department. So we waste a lot of money. We spent millions of dollars studying bomb-sniffing elephants. And then I guess someone decided the elephants wouldn't fit on the helicopters. You know what I mean? We have a lot of crazy spending going on in military. Even McCain has been reviewing some of this in his committee. But you don't get less waste if you make the top line number more. You'll get more waste.
What would you guess the number would be when you send a budget?
I don't know the exact number, but I knew, though, that Tom Coburn was a big deficit hawk. He said there was $100 billion worth of waste in the military, and he also said there was $70 billion worth of spending in the Defense Department budget that is not for defense, completely unrelated to defense. I'm also in favor of auditing the Pentagon. They say they're too big to be audited. That's an insult to the taxpayer. Maybe one or two.
Last question.
Last question.
How would not accept refugees from Syria? The Obama administration has already announced they will take 200,000, so you send them back. Would you send them back? And give me your stance on domestic surveillance. Are we doing enough to find out about people who are already here?
We are not doing enough to know about who is here, and we don't need 200,000 new people. We took 70,000 people from Iraq and we won the war. And my question was, how do you seek political asylum when you win the war? I thought that was for people when they lost the war.
Mr. Trump says he would send them back. Would you send them back?
I wouldn't have them. I wouldn't invite them in the first place. They're not here. I wouldn't invite the Syrian refugees here. I will oppose them coming.
Senator,
One question, then I got to run.
How did the attacks yesterday change your agenda for Syria and Iraq? What would you do differently?
I think the main thing we need to know is who's in our country and are they here to harm us? Let me answer the question. I offered as an amendment to the immigration bill, a bill that would have reinstituted a program that has added scrutiny, added background checks before anybody comes over here, particularly from 25 countries that have hotbeds of radical jihadism within their confines. So under my bill, you would have more scrutiny. I also would not have the expansive numbers, so I would not admit 200,000 people from Syria. I would say, look, Saudi Arabia, you trade with us, you get great benefit from us, you've been throwing gasoline on this fire. Saudi Arabia, you need to accept some of these refugees. Thanks.